So I've been seeing this picture and this language on screen. My pronouns are not up for debate, popping up in a lot of media. I've seen it online a lot of places. I keep seeing various uploads of it. There's this fluffy-haired person with a cardboard sign that says, "My pronouns are not up for debate." This, of course, relates to the social justice fetishization of creating an arbitrarily large number of make-believe genders and then assigning made-up words as the pronouns for these genders. Z, zers, them, this, it goes on. And then, of course, demanding that other people use these make-believe words even when they are so recently made up whoever might be speaking has never heard of them. But of course, what, you're supposed to look it up on your phone before you speak, before you address somebody. Stop and look it up on your phone. Oh, I'm supposed to call you Zing or whatever. My pronouns are not up for debate. And there's a fundamental problem with the logic of this. And that's the concept of my pronouns. Now, I, John, might prefer that you call me him. I mean, my pronoun is him because I'm a man, right? But if you call me her, while I may or may not like that very much, that's your word because you're speaking. If I'm speaking, the words I use are my words. And while the pronouns may refer to you, they're my pronouns because I'm using them. They're my words that I'm using to express myself. And if you're speaking, then they're your words that you're using to express yourself. So this concept, my pronouns, meaning the pronouns referring to me, are not up for debate, whether it's said by me or by some social justice wingnut. They're not. The words don't belong to the person being referred to. They belong to the speaker. And as soon as you start prescribing the words that other people have to use, you are engaging in a form of very dangerous totalitarian thought control. So I have a substitute pronoun for everybody who would like to insist other people use particular made-up words. I have a new pronoun for you. It's fucktard. Hey everybody, John the Other here. Obviously! And I want to talk to you a little bit more about dealing with attacks from social justice warriors and aroused feminists. How to enable your attacker. If you are a man, if you are a conservative, if you're a member of the alt-right, if you are an anti-feminist, or even if you are a classical liberal, which might today be recognized as a libertarian, then you have almost certainly been attacked by a regressive leftist or a social justice practitioner who attempted to belittle or demean or degrade or to otherwise shame you. And depending on your degree of fortitude and experience, they will have succeeded in harming you. And to the degree that you are harmed, you will have participated in the attack against yourself. What am I talking about? Well, what have you been told about yourself? That you are a misogynist? That you are a rape apologist? Have you been told that you are in some sense a monster? Perhaps you are being demonized through an aspect of your identity. Toxic masculinity, male violence, your sexual identity equated to a violent sexual crime. Maybe your ethnicity made equivalent to genocidal racial supremacy. You will have been heaped with the most vicious accusations that your accuser could muster based on your attacker's understanding of what will hurt you most deeply. And in response, you will have responded in one of several different ways. You may have attempted to prove your attackers to be incorrect by the civility and the reasonableness of your reply. You may also have responded with scorn and insults, reflecting the attacker's verbal assault on you with a similar stream of abuse sent back at them. Feminazi, bigot, sexist, and similar epithets may indeed be wholly appropriate terms to describe your attackers, but of course, in any such response, you will be giving aid to your attacker by doing that monkey dance of the evil subhuman that she just finished claiming you are. Oh yeah, it's probably a woman. But let's back up for a second. Let's assume you've just come under verbal attack by either a social justice practitioner or an aroused feminist, and you feel the urge to respond with insults of your own. What is the purpose of your response? You might think your attacker should get a taste of the negative experience that she, or maybe he, has just subjected you to. Maybe give back a little bit of your pain that you just had to eat. But that is not a thing, because your attackers will feel no sting from any epithet that you might use, even if your criticisms are strictly true. The reason for this lack of sting is that your attackers do not see you as a peer, or an equal, or a person of status. They see you as a sub-person who it is appropriate and proper to kick in the face, if your attackers are dullards. And if your attackers are more intellectually capable, then they see you as a tool to be made use of, a pawn to be maneuvered around their game board. Your judgment of them is as important as a pig's judgment to a pig farmer. You may find them deplorable, amoral, bigoted, or dishonest, and that is of no importance to your attacker whatsoever, except to the extent that your possible outrage is a tool by which you can be puppeteered into doing the evil man monkey dance in benefit of their narrative about you. On the other hand, what if you take the reasonable man approach and attempt to talk to your attacker, calmly demonstrating that you are none of the terrible things they are calling you, and you attempt to have a civilized resolution to whatever it is they find so offensive about you? Indeed, even if you cannot convince the person calling you horrible things, at least you will be seen by bystanders as the rational adult. Right? Wrong. That I'm the reasonable man business is what your attacker is counting on. In fact, most men under verbal attack from a social justice warrior will exhibit the reasonable man response because they depend for their public identities on the consensus approval of women. And if the social justice warrior verbally abusing you isn't a woman, then he's an SJW acting out against you on behalf of women. He's literally their knight errant. A knight roaming the countryside in search of combat in which he may prove his chivalric value and his virtue. But your strategy of being the reasonable man is what enables your attackers to verbally maul you with impunity. Because men need to be seen as decent. Because reputation is almost everything in the life of a man, and even when heaped with public scorn by an offended feminist or a SJW, that reasonable man routine you're doing is at least in part an appeasement tactic, and your attacker knows it. You are dancing to their tune because, at least in part, your identity is in the control of your attacker. It's a little different than it would be if the person calling you ugly and demeaning things was just a violent drunk or a traditionally recognizable criminal. You could then defend yourself by conventional means, and you would probably be congratulated for standing up to an ugly bully. But of course, when somebody who doesn't know you begins loudly asserting that you are, a fascist or a rape apologist or a white supremacist or whatever other vile garbage they can dream up, you can't simply respond as you would to a staggering, drunken bar brawler who used these insults to draw you into a bar fight. When they scream at you that you're a rape apologist, you cannot just punch your attacker in the face, as satisfying as that might seem in your imagination. And as much as you are the victim of what used to be called a blood libel, it will be you who is carted off in handcuffs to a nice, cold jail cell. So that leaves us with a question. What do you do when you are actually a reasonable man and you are socially attacked by an SJW or an aroused feminist? Well, let's review the options. Returning their attack in similar coin plays right into their game. You will lose. And what's at stake is more than just the argument. The attack's purpose is to devalue and destroy your public identity. Being reasonable or conciliatory doesn't work either. The game is that they get to be uncivilized, and you're supposed to remain the reasonable man in the face of a torrent of abuse. This is a demonstration for the public of your powerlessness. The powerful can ignore the rules. The powerless cannot. Be nice, and you will be socially cuckolded. But before we get to a third option, it's necessary to distinguish between a person with a legitimate complaint and a person using grievance performance as an offensive weapon with malintention. Somebody might actually have an actual grievance, and defending against attacks made on you with a false intention shouldn't come at the cost of becoming a permanently antisocial prick. So we need a set of markers we can watch for that signal to us whether somebody has a legitimate complaint or whether they are attacking in bad faith with the intent to do us harm. And it turns out that rhetoric is one of the easiest and most reliable signals that your attacker is acting in bad faith. What do I mean by rhetoric? Well, I mean formulaic language, the use of ideological talking points and pompously styled or stereotyped phrases, such as, "You're privileged," "You're a rape apologist," "There is a rape culture," "Toxic masculinity." Now, this list would become quickly tedious if I tried to recite anything approaching a comprehensive list, but you get the idea. The use of rhetorical talking points is a signal to you that your attacker is not dealing honestly and has only the intention to demean and degrade you. Spotting that intent early is very important because you know you are not dealing with an honest disagreement. And without honesty, there is no conversation and no argument. I'll say that again. Without honesty, there is no conversation and no argument. So, if you have already identified that the attack is not based in honesty, and then you still engage with the attacker, all you are doing is cooperatively hanging around and presenting yourself for a mauling. What response do you give then? I hear somebody ask. Well, you give no response at all. You walk away. You don't make an excuse for yourself. You don't verbally defend yourself. You don't try to use reason or persuasion or civility or charm, because all of those communication tactics depend on there being a mutual intention of honesty, which is not present in a social justice warrior's attack on you. You do not give your attacker a response, and note the wording I have used here. Your response, should you make one, will be a gift to the person intent on harming you. Am I saying don't fight back? No, not at all. I am saying don't play by the rules set down for you by your attacker. You're supposed to be civil and civilized and demonstrate you're a good guy, right? Well, that's the trap, because your attacker is playing Calvin ball. Of course, you're not supposed to know that this is nothing except a mauling. You're supposed to think that your attacker, whether operating from misunderstanding or not, is engaging you from their honest perception of a grievance. Because then, you will argue your position, and they will maul you with no allegiance to the truth or civility or conformity of their accusations to any observable facts. So, obviously, don't just stand there and take it, because there is no conversation and there is no argument without honesty. So don't gift yourself to an attacker whose intent is to harm you. You should give them nothing, except the sight of your back as you stroll casually away from the scene of that planned ambush against you. And if anybody would at this point like to point out that it is not courageous to retreat, I will point out the only people who do not run from an ambush are very, very brave corpses. So once you have done two specific things. Number one, identify the malintention of an attack, and rhetoric is your key signal here. And two, make your move to disengage with no responding communication to your attacker. Once you've done these two things, your attacker is no longer in charge of the scene. You are in charge. The game being played was to create a narrative in which you either try to defend yourself against a dishonest attacker who is playing by an invisible and rapidly changing rule set, or do the angry man dance justifying their attack on you. But by recognizing and removing yourself from the engagement, you now get to control the narrative. You are now in charge of the conflict, and you control the terms of engagement. If your attacker follows you and continues to attempt engaging, you have effectively won, because now you are clearly a harassed person. The way, of course, to turn your victory here into a defeat is to, again, turn and engage. If you are an honest and reasonable person, There is no winning move that includes engaging with a dishonest attack. And one other thing, never apologize. Never apologize. In case you missed it, never apologize. And one last thing, never apologize to an SJW. But there's one more thing to mention here. This is the part that is not for normal or civilized or reasonable people. This is the Mythbusters show introduction warning where Jamie and Adam tell you don't try this at home because everything they do is dangerous as hell and they are professionals with years of experience. Once you have recognized the attack, and remember rhetoric is the key indicator for you here, and once you have removed yourself from the situation of the ambush against you, and you are now a moving target, refusing to supply yourself to your attacker and also controlling the terrain and the frame of the attack, you control your attackers. But a final note here. Your emotional state is the ground being fought over. Specifically, who is it who gets to control your emotions? For most men, their sense of public identity is powerfully dependent on the outside consensus of women. And whether a man is a good guy or a terrible slime is not actually in his own control, but in the control of the women who judge him based on his conformity to their requirements. This is a deep topic to touch on so late in this video, but it is not by accident that women are the primary caretakers of children. That's when identity is formed in children and shaped for the rest of their lives by their parental figures. Which means that the attack on your identity by women, or on behalf of women by their male feminist lackeys, is intended to and is highly effective in causing you deep pain. Now, to step outside this trap, a number of strategies can be employed, and I have discussed some of these within a framework I call You Are the Party, meaning you yourself are the source of creativity and happiness and productivity and security in your own life, and recognition of this as a fact forms a basis for self-ownership of your public identity. And recognizing the intent of an attack in its dishonesty, and then the active removal of yourself from that attack, is an application of that principle. You are the party. Why would you bother to defend your identity to a person who isn't even invited to your party? It's your road trip, and it's your party. Thanks very much for listening, and as always, have a lovely, lovely day. So, one more thing before I go. This is not precisely related to the video, but it's a current event, and I think it bears mentioning right away. Mary Bryson, a professor at UBC who was part of a debate against Jordan Peterson, during the debate accused Jordan Peterson of hate crimes and then, like moments later, said, well, that didn't happen. So, gaslighting, right? And invoking the recently passed Bill C-16 to criminalize Jordan Peterson's refusal to use made-up, make-believe gender pronouns. Christy Blatchford, writer for the National Post, wrote an article about Mary Bryson at UBC talking about Bryson's professional misconduct and her outrageous behavior in her classes, and did, I think, a journalistic, credible job. And Professor Mary Bryson, acting in her capacity as a UBC tenured professor with 25, 30 years of experience, guess what? Accused Christy Blatchford of the National Post of incitement to hate crimes. But didn't bother to make this accusation in any official channel, made it through social media, and also didn't bother to tell Christy Blatchford or the National Post. Does anybody think that the universities are going to keep their credibility, or that professors are going to keep their credibility? Thanks very much for watching, and as always, have a lovely day.